Hi, hello everyone, and welcome back. For those of you who were here last week, we really appreciate you coming back. My name is Silvia Christmann. I am an executive coach, and we're here today to talk a little bit more about how to lead in uncertain times. Before we begin, I just want you to, if you have a minute, I want you to just find a comfortable seated position and see if we can take this moment to just close our eyes and just take 3 deep inhales and an exhale and an inhale and an exhale and another inhale and another exhale. Maybe you want to roll your shoulders. Carry a lot of tension in our shoulders right now. Maybe you want to reach your arms up and move to the side. Just move around a little bit. Oop, my chair keeps moving with me. All right. And then when you're ready, just come back, open your eyes, welcome back. Maybe you feel a little bit better. I just saw some comments. Yes. So yes, I am tan. That is correct. Thank you so much for for noticing this. I'm normally based in New York City. I am right now in my second home in Mexico. So it is getting very, very hot here. And even though I spent the majority of my time inside, I think I have a little more exposure to sunlight than others in different regions. So exactly. So, and I want to encourage all of you guys who are listening right now to check in and let me know where you're calling in from. I want to know what you're up to. I want to know where you are. I want to know how you're feeling. It's really important for us to field live questions. I want to know if you want to just put in where you are and maybe one word of how you're feeling. That'd be awesome for us. We want to know where you are. I want to know where you are and how you're feeling, because that way I can answer. Yay, Pennsylvania. I know, everyone is inside. It doesn't really matter if you're in Mexico, Pennsylvania, or New York City. We're all inside Connecticut. Exactly. I think it's the same reality for all of us. And we're here today to talk about how to thrive in uncertainty, how to adapt to uncertainty, and how to create a little bit of stability in an environment that feels very uncertain, so that we learn how to distinguish between what you can control, what you cannot control, and leading from that place, knowing what the difference is and letting go of what we cannot control. The key to thriving in uncertainty is definitely knowing that this is about, if you think of it, this is not about the destination, because the destination right now is unclear. So this is developing a moment-to-moment awareness of what we can do to be present, to be clear, to understand how we can clearly communicate with the people in our lives, and especially our teams. So this is also a session designed for entrepreneurs in particular, and people who are challenged to lead teams. I have a lot of conversations with CEOs and teams every single day, and one thing we've noticed over the last few days is how difficult it can be when you're called to lead, that you now need to lead remotely, and you now need to lead by making sure you're catering to the individual's needs on your team, meaning that you are you're asked by the managers, you're asked by your members of your team that you meet them where they are. And because we're all challenged to live in this complete range of fully expressed emotions right now, which can range from feeling really good, from feeling joyful, finding gratitude, feeling comfort. Maybe you woke up today and you're feeling well resourced, you're feeling energized, you're feeling motivated. And it can range all the way to feeling stuck, angry, sad. A lot of people have been reporting struggling with anger over the last anger and frustration and uncertainty over the last few days. And so knowing as a leader how to understand this complete range of fully expressed emotions and also being able to stay well resourced yourself and helping others to learn how to navigate this very delicate landscape of emotional expression, whether that's for yourself or people on your team, helping them to stay clear and focused, but also allowing them to express what is really going on. When you're bringing vulnerability into the communication channels of your team, it's really important to make sure that you are creating a framework around it, because sharing and being vulnerable is important, and creating a strategic structure around it is really mission critical. Because sharing is one thing, oversharing is another. We want to make sure that we're not causing accidental vulnerability hangovers that trigger far more fear and shame than necessary. And we want to simultaneously make sure that we're giving people transparency and an opportunity to ask for help when needed, and resources to stay emotionally well supported and develop emotional resilience. So that can be a really, really fine line, right? So making sure as leaders, our job is to show up to the best of our abilities. And I'm letting you know that it's okay to have an off day too. I remember 10 years ago when I was still working with the last startup that I was part of building, I decided I needed a mental health day because I was tired. I was burnt out. I wasn't producing anything of substance. And I called in and I said, you know what, I need a mental health day. And at the time, the founder called me back and said, Silvia, that's not a thing. like you're either sick or you come to work. And now I'm so grateful to see, and I'm really happy to see that people are much more responsive to this, that because there's a much greater understanding that if we're not emotionally well resourced, if we're feeling burnt out, we're not producing anything of substance. And we have a much greater opportunity to take a step back and take care of ourselves, to then go back to what is asked of us, because we're not human doings, we're human beings. We're not, project management tool task resolvers. We're not people who just check all the boxes, who get things done. We're human beings, and we're the most productive when we are emotionally well resourced, when we're focused, when we're clear, when we're energized. So when we're looking at what drives productivity, we're really looking at, yes, there is the component of hard work, but the larger, if you think about it as like a pie chart, right? There's the pie chart of hard work, and then there is sleep, diet, exercise, emotional resilience. Maybe there's meditation. There are things that you put into your day and your schedule, which makes up almost half of it, and that assure that you are even able to be focused and clear and resourceful and able to show up and produce the results that you need to deliver for yourself and the team. And placing a greater emphasis right now, I'm really encouraging people to double down on self-care, because it actually, that little bit of slowing down allows you to accelerate, it allows you to elevate up, and it allows you to show up as a source of stillness and reason, especially if you're the person in the team leading. And you have to remember that the energy in the room and within the team stands and falls by how you lead it. So ensuring that you keep yourself well resourced and that you lead by example, which is also giving them transparency that you need to make sure. Sorry, I'm reading the questions as I'm talking, and I'm not the best multitasker. So yes, I will talk about leading with empathy in a minute. you need to make sure that you meet people with empathy and an understanding. Okay. So what does leading with empathy mean? It does not mean we're trying to coddle people and reward them for not getting work done. This is about making them feel like you're sitting on their side of the table and helping them find strategic solutions for the problems that they're encountering. So I usually separate it out to the E, the T, and the S. And that is, what's the emotion present? What are the triggers causing the emotions, and what are the strategies that we have in place? And as a leader, when I'm an empathic leader, I try to help people find out and identify the emotions, really understand the triggers that are in the room causing these emotions, good or bad, and then strategically putting systems and processes in place that help you stay elevated and motivated. So let's name one. If you guys have an emotion you want to pop in here, I will read it out and we'll use that. Otherwise, actually, there's one there. Somebody said that they're feeling caged. Let's do that. If you're feeling caged, you're most likely experiencing a loss of freedom, a loss of identity. You feel trapped, fearful. We also have freaked out. Amazing. Keep them coming. I'll address all of them. People are going up and down. There's an emotional roller coaster of the emotions that we're feeling. So pausing when they come up and not pushing them down is really important. Again, we're human beings. We're not human doing. So we live in a complete range of fully expressed emotions. And when you try to suppress feelings of fear and the emotional roller coaster of feeling freaked out or feeling caged, you're also really blocking your ability to elevate back up. The best thing you can do is acknowledge them. We know feelings are not necessarily facts, but they feel very real in that moment. So knowing what they are and naming them, finding someone to name them with, and feeling fear of getting sick, right? It's very real and it feels paralyzing. By the time we say it out loud and we say, I am feeling fearful, I am feeling afraid, I'm feeling stuck, I'm feeling, there's a lot of apathy in the room. There's anger. We've addressed a lot of anger. It's Wednesday. So the last 2 days we've been with a lot of teams addressing pent up anger. And as a result, a lot of miscommunication and tensions in the room that arise when people are not addressing their anger. And so the key for us is to work through that, to move through by addressing them and identifying them and pausing long enough to say, okay, if I'm freaked out, how much am I spending time on the news? How much am I spending time on Instagram and on channels that make that anxiety greater? Am I being smart about when I access information, how I access this information? And am I bookending this with other things I can do that make me feel better? So I really advocate for most of my clients right now to incorporate something in their schedule I call the 3 M's. And the 3 M's are the 3 M's stand for meditation, or something that is meditative. It brings a meditative quality to your life. We know from research that meditation is one of the number one tools to reduce stress. If you're not a meditator and you find this really difficult, there are tools available you can use. There are group meditations on Zoom now. I love Insight Timer for a lot of people. And, or you do what we call a meditative activity. I have a client who does not like sitting still right now. So because they're not commuting, they're spending 45 minutes intentionally every day to make breakfast and cooking and staying offline and not engaging with anybody and not, answering the phone yet and not checking email and really not engaging with the fearful assumptions of the rest of the world that then add on to your own fear-driven triggers that are currently perhaps, very present in your life, to really focus on something very meditative and simple. I think cooking is a beautiful activity people do. Some people do gardening, or, depends if you have a garden, could be planting something on your balcony. or taking a meditative walk if you have the ability to go outside. So anything that brings a meditative quality where you ground down, connect with yourself, connect with your body, connect with something that other than other people's agendas. And that includes something that might be an activity away from family members and definitely away from the demands of the world and the workplace. So the second M is movement, and that can all be combined. You can do a meditative morning walk where you bring attention to beautiful things that you see. So this morning, for example, I needed more movement and I went for a walk and I combined my mindfulness, which is the third M, my mindfulness activity with my morning walk. I needed to step away. I've been in this same position for a little too long. And so I took a mindfulness walk where I looked at different flowers I found along the way and in some regions. And I do a mindfulness morning connection with my family members, and they're all spread all over the world. Somebody asked me here where I'm from. I have an accent. Yes, I do. I'm from Germany. I'm based in New York, and right now I'm in Mexico. So I'm a third culture kid. I, live between worlds, and my accent is questionable most days. I mix up words all the time because I on any given day speak in 3 different languages and I'm not very good with them, so I mix them. That is it. That's it. So I hope that answers your question. And so what I do with my family members, because they're spread all over the world, is when we do mindfulness walks, or sometimes we do mindfulness walk and talks, we share pictures of flowers in the different regions that we're in with each other, because of the different climate differences. You see in Germany, for example, everything is blossoming right now, or blooming. I don't know what the difference is. It's either blooming or blossoming. It's so beautiful to see what we can bring our attention to. And that's something you can do with your teams as well, to encourage people to share something that's elevating, a little bit irrelevant and yet so significant. It is not work related. It is a point of contact. It is something that you can connect over. It could be, I know if you check Instagram, everyone went on this baking trend for a while. People were making foods. And it could be flowers. It could be clouds in the sky. It's encouraging people to look up and, share affirmation, or look at buildings. I studied art back in Germany, and my teacher back in Germany always taught me that even when I walk through cities, that I look up and look at buildings from the ground up to see how they are greatly intertwined with formations of the cloud or the sun or reflections. And all of these are very small things you can do that I consider little bits of mindfulness that are tied in with gratitude and appreciation that you can share with coworkers, with your peers, your family members, a friend, that help you stay elevated and uplifted. Somebody just said here, Instagram fatigue is real. It totally is, right? Like, it's very real. And so can we find consistently new ways to be part of this journey? Because, focusing on when this can possibly end and if we're going back to normal is a little redundant, because what will normal be? We don't know. It will pass. And, what will be at that point is really up to, well, we don't know. It's not predictable, and it's uncertain. And my goal for you today is to leave you a little bit more resourced to navigating this journey of uncertainty, because that is the story in our head, right? That is what we can do in developing mindfulness, a moment to moment awareness where we let go of hoping that we know, hoping to grasp onto certainty or a certain outcome. We get to really flex our muscles, that if you've ever studied mindfulness or meditation, right? The goal is to develop this moment to moment awareness and letting go of fears of the future and regrets from the past, and staying very present where we are. And in our current situation, we're really tasked to develop this muscle more so than ever, to stay present to what is and discern between what do I have control over, what are simple goals, whether that's for yourself, your team, what is attainable, What is something that needs to be put on the back burner? How do I prioritize tasks? How do I set very clear goals? How do I communicate this very clearly to my team? How do I make this accessible, and how do I create consistent channels of communication that are driven by empathy, that are driven with a collective effort to keep people elevated, motivated, and well resourced, which includes giving them an opportunity to share things that are not work related and to throw up their hand and saying, I need some help, I'm feeling fatigued, I'm feeling tired. Can we consistently share tools and tips of what works for me today? Okay. This is really important. You have to get comfortable with understanding that what worked for me yesterday, that was a phenomenal tool to employ and use, that kept me elevated and joyful, and may not work today, right? Getting comfortable in uncertainty means that what I thought to be true yesterday, or perhaps an hour ago, may not be true right now. And being resourceful enough to continuously look for tools that can elevate me up, change my mood, help me move forward, get unstuck, maybe reach out to people, and consistently keep myself well resourced. For me, I'm switched on 4 days a week, usually 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., which is quite challenging to me. And then I have to unplug for 3 days. Like, I unplug everything, including myself, because I find it difficult to stay available to people. And this is not an exercise in codependence where we go out and we give because we're looking for something in return. Checking in with yourself as a leader of your team is very important, that you can't give and you show up from a place that is well resourced, and you know when to pull the plug on yourself, even if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, move a meeting, when you are not able to show up fully resourced, because it dictates the tone in the room. If you're angry, people get angry. If you're afraid, other people get afraid. And the burden of leadership is that you do not have the liberties to act out your mood, and you're challenged to bring everybody back into the room, especially if they have gone missing. When you notice somebody is MIA and responding slowly, it is a very safe assumption to make that people are challenged and they are having a hard time in some way. To be able to check in with them and ask them specifically, hey, what's up? What's up with you? What is challenging you right now, and what's working for you right now? Those are great questions. Like, what are clients saying? What's going on with them and how they're feeling? Anger, frustration, and miscommunication has been a topic across the board over the last few days. Something already the end of the week last week was leading into that already. Yeah, it's people are shutting down. There's a mixture between apathy and anger, and I want to remind everyone that we're going through something that is a form of collective grief. Okay, we're human beings. We have this complete range of fully expressed emotions. You cannot escape your feelings. Pushing down fear, anxiety, and whatever it is will cause apathy. And apathy is, a form of negative denial, which means that eventually that's a ticking time bomb. It's going to go off in some way, shape, or form, either in anger, miscommunication, conflict, or it's going to result in deeper depression and apathy. Positive denial is what I'm trying to advocate here, is being much more attuned on a moment-to-moment basis of how you're feeling, where you are, and what you need. Identifying remember the E, the T, and the S, right? The emotion, the trigger, the strategy. Identifying what the emotion is, understanding the trigger, and putting strategies in place that are working. If that is eating a cookie, by all means, go eat a cookie. But, translating your little stop and snack at the fridge strategy to alleviate the fear and anxiety, can you translate that into something that's more productive, such as a walk and talk, right? Maybe you can reach out to someone and talk to them about flowers you see along the way. Something that seems insignificant, rather than filling your body with the first offenders. It's alcohol, sugar, fat, snacks, and that actually decrease your ability to be focused. They're not helpful for your body chemistry. But if you need a cookie, by all means, eat a cookie. Last night I had a craving. I I made vegan chocolate mousse because I really wanted it. And, why not? Who cares? Really, who cares? If you want to eat it, but also make sure you're staying in touch with yourself enough to understand the difference. Where am I overcompensating and where am I strategically giving myself something that makes me feel better because I can, right? Back to positive denial, the concept of negative denial and positive denial. Negative denial is this like, no, it's fine, I'm fine, it's not happening, I'm feeling okay, I'm feeling fine. And literally people will use those exact words. If you ask them how they're doing, they're fine, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm okay. And there's no greater range of words used to describe their emotional landscape. It's a pretty decent indicator that there's no process in place to deal with emotions or even identifying the feelings. If we're looking at positive denial, we're looking at the ET and the S. We're looking at what is the feeling, what is arising, what are the triggers causing it? Is there something that I can do? Do I need to stop myself from reading the news for a couple of days? Do I need to elevate up? Do I need to put in place better strategies? Have I meditated? Did I practice mindfulness today? Have I called someone to tell them that I love them? Am I making sure that did I move, right? Did I go for a walk? Did I breathe fresh air? Did I do any of these very simple things? Or do I need to step up my game? Do I need to ask for help, look for mental health professionals that are here and available, right? It's really important to understand. There's a question here if you can, around negligence. If you wanted to elaborate on that, I can talk to you about this. Yeah, honesty. So got it.
We could talk.
Go for it.
We decided that we were gonna have a little segment, have a little banter and conversation. For those that don't know, I am an entrepreneur myself. Started a creative agency where like basically all of our capabilities were just under siege, right? Like we can't throw events anymore. We can't produce content for brands anymore because you can't be around them in the same way that you're used to. And then it's also just kind of like to this point where, developing strategies for this modern time, like so many people have been protective over, I spent months building a 2020 plan, like can I really go and throw that away and all that kind of stuff. So for me, when I look at that question of like, how do you communicate a sense of certainty about the long term? I just think, and this is one man's opinion, I'm curious as to what you think, Silvia, and who you've spoken to. Like, I think anyone that's trying to really say that they know what the future will hold is lying or not being totally truthful with themselves. And to me, to hear from a leader right now saying that, like, in all honesty, like, I got to keep it 100 with you that I don't know. And if I told you that I knew, then I wouldn't be totally factual and I wouldn't be setting you up for success. Like, I feel like right now, everybody's got to be human in the sense that like we're not going to go back to what it was when you sat at your desk with a nice 8 a.m. cup of Starbucks and maybe you went to a cocktail after a happy hour and you had your week planned out because you had this routine. Like we're all developing new routines, and so that's the same for a business, in my opinion. Like, what do you think about that, and what do you think in terms of what you've been hearing from other business leaders?
Yeah, so it's really, and this is such a great question. Thank you for jumping in too. This is good, so great. I really want to encourage people to get comfortable in uncertainty and having the courage to communicate it from that place, right? I want to just elaborate a little bit more about like what positive denial really is, and that is being comfortable with uncertainty and denying it power over your current situation. Okay, so let me break this down. It means that whatever feelings arise, uncertainty, not knowing, fear, whatever they are, addressing them, naming them, talking about them, allowing people to come to you with them, and also being very clear that you do not have the answers. You don't have to have the answers. Our job is to address them, to identify them, to do the best we can, to stay agile, right? Remember agile software development where people over processes? This is what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
This is exactly what we're talking about. You have to stay agile and you have to stay willing to address these feelings as they arise and talk through it and being comfortable with saying, I don't know. Right now, I don't know. This is I don't know. And engaging people in this conversation and allowing them consistently to keep asking this question so that you can comfortably say, I don't know, but here's what I do know. The next 3 steps are this. The next 5 steps are this. And then we additionally have to be very comfortable saying that even though yesterday I thought these next three steps that we were going to execute on would be the best course of action, any startup founder would know this anyway. There tend to
Yeah.
be a little bit more resourced around this, and that whatever you thought was the best next three steps turn out not to be it, to then recommunicate that where there's another additional change of direction, and to do it in a way that people don't get fearful, right?
Yeah.
That addressing fears instead of denying them, you're taking their power away, you're taking the uncertainty away, and you're giving people clarity and the ability to communicate what they need.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, and so one of the things that I kind of would also want to ask you about, or just get your point of view. So, oddly enough, I come from kind of like this digital background. So it feels like the last 10 years of my career I've been preparing for this new reality of what we're doing right now, right? Like getting comfortable with the fact that digital communication is going to at one point be as important, if not more important, than what we're used to from an analog or physical perspective. And right now, it's all we have. So when you talk about like all the notions of being agile, like I think that is inherently native to where digital comes from,
Yeah.
right? Like everybody that's in the world of digital knows terms like testing and learning and
Yeah.
optimization and like the analogy of like flying the plane while you're like, what is it, building the plane while you're flying it, right? And so it's funny because I feel like people that come from that kind of background, or people even that like really were engaged in like uh social media, are just set up better for this because we've been
Hmm.
preaching a lot of this. And like from my perspective, talking to brands, like I've been telling people, like the hardest conversation I've ever had with a brand manager is like, I know that you think you know, but you really don't until people tell you what the idea is or should be, or the direction should be. And now there's this conceit of like, we really have no idea. So we have to test and learn. We have to be dynamic. We have to be agile. Are you seeing a lot of people that are like really sympathizing with that, or are you seeing a lot of people that are really getting frustrated because that might be where they have to go and they're so uncomfortable by giving up the reins to
Yeah.
that others outside of their headspace?
Yeah. So there's also a great question from Christine who said, "Doesn't I don't know freak people out, especially your employees, right?" And
Mm,
what you just said, it's no. If you teach them how to be agile, which means we're testing and learning as we go. So obviously, startups, people in tech are naturally better positioned for that. A lot of
right.
my clients are already better positioned for that because they're entrepreneurs, they're startups. They're built their startups around testing and learning as you go. So they're inherently more comfortable in uncertainty, and their teams are a little bit more emotionally resourced because there has been no certainty, and you don't build a startup with certainty. It just doesn't exist.
Right. Sure.
So what we've learned from that, and what we've learned from them, is that it's now being adapted into other industry sectors much more so, to teach them what agile means. Agile doesn't mean freaking people out. It means that you're focusing on what's right in front of you, and you test and you learn and you iterate and you test and you learn. So if you look at them, it's like a simple marketing metrics, right? It's like you put something out to the best of your ability, you test it, you observe what happens, you come back to the table with rigorous honesty, you understand where everybody is, how they're feeling, um, you know, what needs to change, you make necessary changes, you communicate it through the appropriate channels, you have structures in place for this, and then you put it back out, right? And so there is in that cadence there's a comfort in that, because you stop looking at this goal of what will happen in the future, which keeps everybody in uncertainty, and you're keeping everybody in this moment to moment. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. This is what we tested. This is what's working. This is what's not working. Here's what needs to change. This is what worked yesterday. This is what's not working. And you get everybody to be in a much more of in a circle that resolves around a source of stillness and reasoning and testing and learning. We're all in it together, and give people a feeling of stability
Mm,
within that uncertainty. That's the misconception. Uncertainty doesn't have to be destabilizing. You can be stable within that, right? There's five very distinct emotions people go through when, and they're very closely related to grief. Okay. So grief and momentum emotions are actually identical because they start as you're testing, you're going with like a shock, a disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's anger and frustration because something assumption you made isn't working out, right? Every startup founder knows that. You're like, man, that was the strategy and that's not a thing right now. Then there's a little bit of like apathy and numbness, and sometimes you feel like working on it, and sometimes you don't feel like working on it, right? There's negotiating with reality, and then there's like this forward momentum of finding what works and then acceptance, and that's how you keep the wheels moving forward. It's a consistent iteration. And keeping people in that consistent emotional iteration as well as strategic planning to teach people how to be agile with testing and learning gives people more emotional and mental stability in these challenging times.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much there that I think is really important right now. Like I think that whole notion that you're saying of like collectively acknowledging the uncertainty, but doing that collectively and knowing that like if we try to gain some semblance of certainty as a team, knowing that things are so admittedly fucked up, that's so much better than just sitting there and trying to forecast because you can't forecast without execution. Like I feel
Right.
like we're in that like there's a playing field where like it's just been leveled right now, and it's like people have uncertainty from going into unemployment, and people have uncertainty from saying that like hey like my business is not going to be what it was. Like I've been there, and people have uncertainty from having to apply for bailout loans and stuff like that. And like before all of this, unemployment was like oh like you're filing for unemployment, what'd you do wrong? Or hey, you need a loan, like where'd it go wrong? Like it felt like a indictment on you as like an entrepreneur or as a business leader or as just like a professional that you would need like help because we're like such a prideful culture of like look at my story on how I built this and how everything seemingly went wrong and then just one day it went right and we're all good and we're multimillionaires now. And like I just feel like there's this conceit and this reality where it's like no one's gonna do that right now. And that's okay.
No.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's okay. It's okay to just get better each day. Like it's okay to be on unemployment because everybody is. And then when you finally get off, even if that job's not your dream job, like what a massive success because now you're gonna make more money and you're gonna have some understanding that like I do have new value to add and like I don't have to be relying on this. But like I just think that we're in this interesting place where it's almost like that pride has gone to the wayside and this reality of like we're all fighting for survival and if we do that together, we have a better
Mm.
odd and chance of achieving success than if we try to go at it alone. Which like I don't know about what you've experienced, but I've seen a very selfish culture in all facets of corporate infrastructure and to entrepreneurial ones, right? Where everybody wants to be the one to stand on the mountaintop and be like, I did it. And now it's like, that's going to be really hard. And if you take that approach, like, I just don't see it happening. And so there's all these like stigmas and kind of like nuances that I feel like we just get indoctrinated to by fault that have now faded away. And I kind of think it goes back to your point in that like uncertainty is a reality, and if we embrace that and we drive against that together, we can do so much more.
Well, uncertainty also takes humility, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And leading with humility and bun transparency around this. I think we're passing the age of following hustle porn and celebrating rock stars that magically created something without ever falling down, and getting a little bit more real around what it takes, and really understanding that you know, there's some really great spiritual rhetoric sometimes that now makes so much more sense. It's
Mm.
the only constant in life is change. Have you ever heard that? That is literally
Yeah.
the only constant
I have
that is
I have heard
change.
that, and I want to just add that actually there's an iteration from a really great woman that was Justine and her sister Stevie's grandmother, who we all called Nana, who unfortunately
Mm,
passed away not that long ago. And her phrase with that stuck with me forever is that we all make plans and God laughs. And I
yeah,
think
totally.
it's the exact same one, but it's just so relevant and it's like playing out in the most impactful way possible right now. Sorry to cut you out, but I just thought that I had to add that because I know Justine's watching and we kind of have all taken that with us, since her passing.
I love that. That is such a great, grade saying, yeah, we make plans and God laughs. And yeah, and it's so true. It is, we have to lead with transparency and we have to lead with humility. And hopefully we're moving away a little bit more from this culture of, I call it hustle porn, where everyone is just
Mm.
like exhausting themselves and then getting somewhere. And we're not talking about the emotional reality. And there's some great podcasts out there. And I think I wrote an article about it not too long ago, and it's about the emotional consequences on being an entrepreneur, what we don't talk about, right? The what it takes, the emotional toll it takes on you to live in that much uncertainty for extended period of time, for an extended period of time. And talking about what are we feeling and how do we stay emotionally well resourced, and why it is so important to have humility, and why it's so important to have vulnerability, and why it's so important to develop that moment to moment awareness of understanding how we're feeling, what the triggers are, and how we can resource ourselves with strategies, ourselves, our team, the people in our lives, so that we can learn how to navigate uncertainty without getting attached to the outcome, right?
Mm.
The 16 years ago, when I went on my first sort of spiritual journey, that was the biggest thing that I learned. And it was really learning how to thrive in uncertainty, because attaching yourself to an outcome just sets you up for failure every single time. And now I feel like we're in this collective, massive, I mean, I don't think there has ever been a time where we were able to connect with such transparency globally during a time where there is so much uncertainty going around in the entire world. And we have a real opportunity to share with humility and transparency and assure each other that we're all we're not in this alone. We're in this together, and we all feel lost sometimes, and we all feel sad sometimes, and we can all still find things that are joyful. We can still move forward. We're not stuck. We might be caged, but we're not stuck. To
Right.
discern the outside problems from the inside world and maintain emotional freedom with each other and for each other, while our exterior world might at times be out of our control. But collectively, we can continue to put one foot in front of the other and test and learn and test and learn. And because this is where community really comes into play, because we do need each other. We're human beings, and staying emotionally well resourced also depends on the way that we connect with each other with humility and vulnerability and transparency.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I don't know if you're a fan of, Deepak Chopra, but like I feel like his whole vibe is along this line. And I'm obviously I've heard of him and not very much of a huge like observer or follower of his until I kind of like got caught on in what's going on now. Only because some people cut through, some people you hear from them, and people that are relatable. And so, being a New York guy, we have the radio station Power 105.1, which is like hip hop, and Charlamagne the God is on it. And he had a conversation with him recently, and Charlamagne's like really awesome in the sense that he's like really a pure asshole in his interviews, and like how he just drills people with questions that they don't want to answer, but he's also very like in tune with his emotional self, which I think he preaches as like a big thing for the African American community, because also like just growing up in the city, like we're very much like, oh, like you don't talk about feelings type of thing. And so I think that like he's opened up an aperture for me to be more comfortable doing that, just as someone that I can relate to at that like kind of city vibe, whatever. Long-winded way of saying that, like he talked to Deepak recently, and they were talking about how like this uncertainty is a gift because everybody's trying to make plans all the time. And what you're doing is you're creating emotional angst and anxiety because this plan that you have made for yourself has so many variables that can go wrong, that every
Mm.
time that things look like they're not going to ladder up to this plan that is arbitrarily made, because when you make a business plan, people are like, gotta have these goals, gotta have all these things, blah 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 blah, otherwise it's not real. That like to your point about the entrepreneur stress and like all this hustle porn, it's like you make these arbitrary plans that sometimes are really just pulled out of the ether, and all along the journey are hundreds of different ways for you to basically beat yourself up because you're not hitting your own benchmarks. But what you're not taking into account all of that is the reality of uncertainty that everyone goes through, that you cannot plan or predict for. And if you don't embrace that like in the moment feel, it's going to be very hard to ever realize your plan because you're kind of like battling with yourself the entire time. And it was just like this eye-opening thing for me personally, where I was just like, whoa, like, because I do that, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm like, oh, we should be at this revenue by this date, and we should have this many employees by this date, and like we should go and have a great big PR article by this point in time. And it's like, yeah, but like, what are all the things that are going to get you there? Like, if you just focus on how can you be great today and like this week, like, you probably have a better chance of getting there and also feeling like fulfilled, you know? And so that's one of the things that's like really been big for me is like, I try not to make plans that are like more than 3 days in advance because I don't know what happens on day 4 anymore. No idea.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm a huge fan of Deepak Chopra. I interviewed him for one of my podcasts a
Oh,
while
that's
ago.
amazing.
Yeah, and I think what we're talking about is mindfulness, and I don't sometimes mindfulness. I don't know if I care about the word. What we're really talking about is developing a moment-to-moment awareness of who you are, how you're feeling, what you can control, what you cannot control, what you have to let go of, where you need to adjust priorities and be rigorously honest with yourself and other human beings in a timely manner and choose appropriate wording, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the question that we just saw in here is, what do you do? And I want to address this. Again, Christine just wrote this in. How do you tell an employee honesty? Honesty, transparency is the key, because you're also giving them an opportunity to think and plan ahead enough for themselves to not live in limbo, right? Not communicating someone in an appropriate time that you may not be able to keep paying them really keeps them in limbo and then surprises them with the outcome. So
Mm-hmm.
having the courage of being rigorously honest of what you think the current cash flow runway is gives them an opportunity to prepare themselves and have an understanding of seeking out alternate solutions rather than surprising them. It is unfortunate, and it's an unfortunate, really hard reality. And as entrepreneurs, we have to manage cash flow, and we have to be able to be really honest with people on our team what the runway is and when you think it will start affecting them and why. It is, having it's really that being able to lead difficult conversations with courage, wholehearted, be a wholehearted leader. A wholehearted leader has the courage and the bravery to communicate effectively, when it's necessary, right?
Yep.
If you're not clear on it, there's no point in saying, we don't know when you're going to have a job, but eventually you won't. That's unnecessary panic. But if you know what your cash flow is in your runway, then you can be, hey, I don't know if I can keep paying you, can translate into, this is my current cash flow. I anticipated I'll be able to pay you for this long. Beyond that point, unless we bring in X, Y, and Z cash, it's going to be questionable. And I want you to be emotionally prepared. I want you to have options, and I want this to be a transparent conversation, right? That's a brave way to address this, to give people a chance. Obviously, there's HR concerns depending on how large your team is and how it's going to affect others. So
Right.
check in with HR and legal reasons before you have these conversations, But I'm trying to demonstrate an empathic way to relate that. We're looking for wholehearted leadership, because what we're seeing across the board now, more so than ever, in that it is the wholehearted leader that leads with bravery, courage, transparency, and that is more successful and able to keep their team moving into the same direction collectively and making sure that everybody feels supported and emotionally well resourced. And it's those, and this is what I see more than anything, is those who are not emphasizing this having a significantly harder time with their teams.
Yeah, I think you nailed it 100% on transparency and empathetic conversation. I've had to do some of those myself, and it sucks. It's not easy, but I think there's an experience that comes through with that level of transparency and empathy where I feel like it can potentially make your relationship stronger. Because so often people are used to not getting the real deal, that like when you have a very emotional conversation about those realities, there's just something that like, it's like it's like the best friend that you had in high school where like you had a huge blow up and they were your best friend, and like something terrible happened and you cry it out, you hug it out, and then afterwards like you'll end up having a better relationship because you connected at that level. I think that there's some synergies to this. I think there's another piece to it where you know, everybody's going through it. And again, we're talking about like these new realities, and then they're all changing. And, you know, one thing that I found is just a transparency around like, hey, like if these things happen, we're not all going back to our full salary and where we have been, right? So that's a reality of like, if you aren't looking at your living expenses and the way that you have lived and what you need to survive in a different way today than you have in the past, you know, there's certain things like childcare and stuff that you have to consider, and that's a non-negotiable, right? But there's certain things like how much money were you spending on things at retail that you really don't need? How much were you spending on vacations that you're not going to have to budget for right now? There's a lot of like self-assessment that goes on, and there's a lot in the sense of like we really value you, and we are building this thing back up from a catastrophic situation, and we can't do what we used to do, but we can do this. And if we can do this in the
Yeah.
meantime, knowing
Yeah.
your commitment to us and our commitment to this together, if we can do that and bind together now, then we can do more when we continue to work together and we continue to build. And so it'll be iterative, but like so many people are their best bets on employment that anything's better than that, you know? And
Hmm.
so it's not about taking advantage, it's about openness and trust and honesty and transparency, I think, to build from a point of, hey, like we have nothing going on, you're not creatively inspired, you're not doing anything, and we do have some money, and it's not what you're used to because it's not what it's used to for any of us. But if that helps, then we want to have you be part of this, and we have a commitment to building together. And I think that's like the other go between of, and like honestly, then you would just also have the conceit of like, and if that doesn't work for you, that's totally fucking awesome and okay, and we'll be your biggest fans.
Yeah. I think you said a couple of things I find really important. I want to highlight again is like a false sense of pride doesn't lead you anywhere. It
Mm,
gets you stuck, if nothing else. And being rigorously honest with yourself leads you to being honest with others and leads you to bravery, right? But it's a muscle that many of us have not necessarily exercised before, and avoidance is prominent in many cultures, and it's taught to us in various different facets. So leading with honesty and getting out of avoidance can be very difficult. So I don't want to pretend that this is a very easy thing to do because it takes time to develop the rigorous honesty with ourselves before we can have an honest conversations with others, so that we don't lead with shortcut rationale and half truths, and we're able to even to stand tall without shame, even
mm,
in light of the most uncomfortable truth, right?
totally.
And so, and in understanding, it's yeah, and it's not. See, Elaine just said this too. It's not easy to be honest with yourself, and sometimes we get it wrong. It's also why I don't call it honesty. I like to call it transparency, because what I think to be true and to be honest today might turn out to be really different tomorrow. And I want to make sure that I give you my moment to moment transparency to the best of my ability. And with that, also an ability to do better tomorrow if I didn't get it right that day, or if my perception of reality that day felt honest but wasn't true. And if I'm transparent about it, I give myself the opportunity every single day to start anew and try better and come back to the conversation, even if I feel like I wasn't leading it with the most amount of integrity or transparent honesty. But in that moment, I may have believed it to be true. And we want to ensure to develop a culture, a fail forward culture, where we're allowed to fail forward together and keep humanity alive in the room and lead with, yeah, and lead with humility. That if I give you my transparency, it means that I'm trying in that moment to give you the most honest version of what I can come up with, and I'm still a human being, and I might just my perception of the situation might be wrong, and tomorrow I might have to tell you something different. But it gives me an opportunity to be transparent every single day, and holding someone to who they were yesterday. Remember, our growth game needs to be strong right now, so we can't
Mm,
hold people to who they were yesterday, and we have to meet them where they are today and forgive them when they don't show up with their best version of themselves today, because they probably will go back to their best version tomorrow, or maybe in an hour. But forgiveness right now is key to not get stuck and getting lost in unnecessary resentment and being able to have difficult conversations with empathy and love and kindness in the room.
Yeah, there's I've had a lot of fun just getting on here and talking with you, because I think that there's a lot of things that are just it's just validating, right? Like you have these thoughts and you're like, I don't know, maybe I'm being crazy in terms of them, but like I think we're very much like on the same wavelength. It seems like a lot of people are having the same kind of thoughts that we like you're experiencing in your line of business that I've had that I've experienced with other people. So, if anything, I feel just a great sense of gratitude for being able to kind of like share in this and hopefully you know have some people understand that like we're all going through this same mindset together. We are unfortunately reaching time, which I am actually regretful for because I'm having such a good time talking to you. But if there's anything you want to add as a sign off or whatever to people who've been watching, this is a great time to do it. And otherwise, I'll shut up and just say thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I feel really, really blessed that you guys have me here. I love being part of this. Let me know if you have questions. You guys can always reach out to me personally. I think we're going to do this again next week. So if you want to keep coming back, we want to hear from you guys. We want to actually be able to answer real questions. So if you don't tell us what's alive for you right now, we can't answer it. So have the courage to reach out, tell us what you want to hear about so we can tell you and give you our thoughts and insights on the subject matter. So that said, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being part of this team. You guys are incredible. Thank you to you, and thank you to Justine as well for having me here.
Thanks a lot, Sylvia. Talk to you again soon. And in the meantime, we'll get our questions ready for the next go. All right?
Great.
How are you doing?
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.
Bye.